Welcome, everyone, to another flash episode of Kicking It Classic with JCD. I am your host, John JCD DiMaselli. As always, we are brought to you by the PWP Nation Network. Check out PWP Nation on Twitter at PWP Nation. You can check me out on Twitter, John DSINY1219. You can check out the show, Kicking It Classic with JCD, at KITCW JCD. You can follow the show on Facebook at facebook.com/Kicking It Classic with JCD. And you can email the show, Kicking It Classic with JCD at yahoo.com. On this episode, we're going to look at one of my favorite topics of all time, and we've touched on it in prior episodes, and we're just going to bring it all to a head right now, and that is 1997 Shawn Michaels. Now, 1997 is known for a lot of things. It's known for the Royal Rumble in the Alamo Dome, Austin versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania, Sting versus Hogan at Starrcade, the rise of WWF coming back from the ass whipping for over a year and a half by WCW, and of course the Montreal Screwjob. But one of the things that gets lost in the shuffle of all of 1997 is how much of a total douchebag Shawn Michaels was. And it's no surprise. I mean, everyone knows the happy-go-lucky, God-loving HBK that exists today. But before then, the Shawn Michaels that existed, especially during that time, was a complete and total unprofessional douchebag. And, I mean, listen, everyone knows the stories more or less about, him and Sonny, his backstage politics, Bam Bam Bigelow, God rest his soul, has told stories. Chris Candido, God rest his soul, has told stories. But there's still another side to the level of douchiness that was Shawn Michaels during that time, and that's what we're going to delve into right now. Now, most people would assume it started at the Royal Rumble in 1997 in San Antonio, but if you really think about it, it probably goes back to Survivor Series at Madison Square Garden that year. At that night, he was defending the WWF title against Sid, and I don't think anybody expected the crowd to turn on Shawn the way we did, and I say we because I was at that show. The crowd wanted blood, and I mean, I'm sure the women and the kids were behind HBK, but that crowd, which was predominantly 18 to 49 male, were all pro-Sid, and I think it caught everybody involved off guard, including Michaels. And that's when, Shawn's douche meter probably went from like a 6 to like a 10. He was very unhappy backstage after the match. And that's why his character took the turn it did. Part of it was just, okay, we need to update the character, and part of it was Shawn just acting out. And some of the promos he cut, they had a little more realism to them, and it was a lot of Shawn's anger and frustration starting to come to light. Now, we get to the Royal Rumble. And the plan for the Royal Rumble was always Shawn was going to win the title, but he was going to turn heel, or Shawn was going to lose the title and turn heel on Jose Lothario, but the whole point of the show was Shawn was going to turn heel in the Alamo Dome in his home state of Texas. That was always the plan. Lo and behold, I think it was Saturday morning, Shawn's got the flu. And maybe Shawn can't work the show. Maybe they got to find a substitute. Shawn doesn't know if he's going to be able to go. Well, lo and behold, Vince McMahon then tells Shawn, well, okay, we won't do the heel turn, and you'll just beat Sid. Lo and behold, Shawn starts feeling better. Now, the stage is obviously set that Shawn has to face and lose to Bret Hart at WrestleMania. Whether it's for the title or not, that's going to be one of the big matches, if not the second biggest match, short of the title match, if it wasn't for the title at WrestleMania. So, they put the title on Shawn. Shawn was scheduled to have a rematch with Sid on a live Thursday edition of Raw, because Raw used to get preempted for the Westminster Dog Show. The word was that Sid was going to retake the title from Shawn. Shawn and Bret would not be for the title at Mania. It would just be a straight-up grudge match, and Bret would get his win back over Shawn from the year prior. Because, again, Shawn not being heel out of the Rumble, Shawn was going to turn heel after losing the title back to Sid. Well, we all know what's coming next. Lo and behold, Shawn's knee is barky and has to go have surgery, and his career is probably over, and he lost his smile, and he just wants to go home, and relinquishes the title. Throws WrestleMania 13 completely for a loop. I mean, that show, for as good as it was, that show should have been a million times better had they been able to pull off their original card. Like, if you look at what was going on, I know we ended up getting Bret Austin out of it, which was probably better for the company as a whole. But on paper, if you look at what the original WrestleMania 13 card was going to be versus what it was, the original card on paper was a million times better. But again, it doesn't happen. So Shawn vacates the title. And, he's got to go have surgery, this, that, and the other thing. Shawn shows up backstage, or tells Vince the weekend of the go-home show to Mania that he wants to come to Raw. That he's feeling better. Because, of course, the WrestleMania card's locked in. There's no way Vince is going to change anything now. There's no way to add Shawn to the show. Nothing. And Shawn shows up at that show, and he's moving around pretty freaking good. And shows up and, does a promo and, even shows up, just walks the ramp during the main event segment. There's like a wild brawl going on, and, Shawn's there. And it's really a bad look. Come to WrestleMania, Shawn's doing commentary during the main event. And it's like, this son of a bitch. Like, you could really start to see. And listen, I'm not going to lie. Yes, I was cheering Sid, and yes, I wanted blood in Madison Square Garden, but when it came down to Shawn and Bret, I was a Shawn guy. Not even going to try to lie. But you could start to see, oh my God, this guy's a son of a bitch. So it was clear he just didn't want to drop anything to Bret at WrestleMania. That's number one. So now he comes back. Bret is a full-on heel coming out of Mania. The night after Mania, he cuts a promo, and they actually work an angle where Bret does the figure four on the leg post with Shawn. Now, if your knee was that bad and you needed knee surgery, you couldn't do that spot. And, the promo itself, Bret and Shawn just start really ripping into each other. Like, you could tell, if you're looking for the beginnings of where their relationship went sour, you could probably, if not from this promo, it's sour leading into the promo. But again, Shawn doesn't care about anything. We move along into the summer. Now Shawn's back. He's competing on like a semi-regular basis. And you're hearing reports. Again, the dirt sheets were really not as big. The internet wasn't what it is now. You had the hotlines, and there were talks that pretty much at every Raw that Shawn actually showed up to, him and Bret were getting into some sort of argument. Him and Vince were getting into some sort of argument. Insert random talent here, and Shawn was getting into an argument with them. There were talks of a fist fight between Bret and Shawn backstage at a Raw. So now, Shawn ends up somehow teaming with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they're the tag champs. They face each other at the Royal Rumble. It goes to a draw because they couldn't get along. And then all of a sudden, Shawn disappears again. Now, Shawn says he wasn't trying to go to WCW. Eric Bischoff says he wasn't trying to go to get Shawn to come to WCW. Those men are both liars. Shawn was doing everything in his power to get released from his contract. I think he even went to court or tried to get a lawyer involved just to let him out of his deal so he could go. And Bischoff would have taken Shawn in a heartbeat. I got to find the picture, and if I find it, it's going to be hard to prove when it was dated, but I remember seeing it then, and I know that doesn't mean much. There's a picture of Shawn, 97 Shawn, rocking an Outsiders t-shirt, supposedly backstage at an event, which I know that doesn't mean much, but at the time, that meant a lot. There's also the story that Shawn, Raw and Nitro were in the same area. Might have been Virginia, ironically enough. And apparently Shawn leaves Raw, gets into an argument with Vince, leaves Raw, and tries to get on Nitro. Eric Bischoff, to his credit, does not do it because the legal... Forget it, Vince would have owned WCW at the time. So now Austin has to vacate the tag titles because Shawn's disappeared and no one knows if Shawn's coming back. Austin has to vacate the tag titles. Shawn's out of that angle. Lo and behold, right before SummerSlam, Shawn's announced as a special guest referee for Hart Undertaker, and if Hart loses, he can't wrestle in the U.S. anymore. I think that was the storyline. And it was like, okay, so we're finally going to get to Hart, Shawn here, and it's going to be ironic watching Shawn be responsible for Bret having to win the title, which does happen. They do a spot, and the follow-up is just executed horribly. Bret tries to bring a chair into the ring, and Shawn takes the chair from Bret. Bret then spits on HBK. HBK goes to hit Bret with the chair. In retaliation, Bret ducks. Shawn hits Taker, counts to 3. Okay, you can kind of see where, all right, we're going to finally get the Bret-Shawn matchup. Shawn's going to go after Bret for the title. Okay, makes sense. However, the next night on Raw, they present it as it was all Shawn's fault. And all of a sudden, Shawn is getting booed out of the building. I guess they did post-match interviews with fans, and I guess they found the right one to make it out that Shawn was a heel at this point, blaming Shawn for what happened. Shawn's getting booed during his promo, so Shawn starts cutting a promo. All the time, it's feeding into the fact that Shawn pretty much hates everybody and everything backstage anyway. So now we've got the build for Bret-Shawn for Survivor Series. Now at this point, Shawn's mentality is so far gone because it's obvious he's not going to be able to go to WCW. He's just dropping bombs on promos on Bret and the family. And, this is when Shawn implied that Bret was having some sunny days, referencing a potential affair between Bret Hart and Sunny, which is ironic because about a year and a half earlier, it was being reported that Shawn was having an affair with Sunny behind Chris Candido's back. There's multiple backstage altercations. Shawn is just a nightmare. But apparently, somehow, some way, they're able to get a semi-relationship again, professionally with Bret and Shawn. It's even documented in the Wrestling Shadows documentary. At one point, Bret asks Shawn, are you sure you want me to say these things about you? And Shawn's like, yeah, go ahead, do it, I don't care. Whatever, giving Bret the permission to go off on him, in retaliation. I'm hitting you, you hit me back. Come on, man. And it shows that despite all the activity and everything that Shawn had going on and what was racing through his mind and how he felt about things, Shawn still understood how to do business. And, so he wasn't too sensitive with his ego to say, no, don't you dare say anything about me. Throw in the fact that it becomes common knowledge that Bret Hart is leaving, and now Shawn sees his position in the company even growing because now Bret will be gone. And forget it, the ego is just out of control. Survivor Series comes, we all know the story with Montreal. We don't need to go back to that. But Shawn, and again, this is shown on the documentary, lies to Bret's face. Oh, I had no knowledge of that. May God strike me down. And there's talk that Shawn was not going to carry the belt on to Raw. But because Nitro aired an hour earlier and Bischoff announced Bret Hart and he took a couple of shots, Shawn then decided on his own, this is the story, that he said, screw this, I'm going out there with the belt and just give me a mic and give me about 7 minutes before we do any angle and I'm unloading on everybody. And that's what Shawn did. He unloaded on Bret. He unloaded on Hulk Hogan. He unloaded on Randy Savage. He unloaded on everybody. And it was that, you could almost sense that watching that promo, that a weight was lifted off of Shawn, because at least from a business perspective, he got to get everything off his chest that had been bothering him for the last year. And, up until WrestleMania, when there was some talk that maybe he didn't want to do business for Austin, and Undertaker, the story is, was waiting behind the curtain, had his hands taped up, just in case he had to beat the living piss out of Shawn. There weren't too many issues with Shawn once Bret was gone. Like, Shawn was very willing to work with Ken Shamrock. He was willing to work with Owen Hart, but only so far. That's why that feud never made it to a pay-per-view, because Shawn was going to have to pin Owen. I mean, you could see that from a storyline standpoint, but there was no way, despite the fact that I think Vince quietly would have had Owen pin Shawn in a non-title match. I think the idea was, you can't have Shawn lose to a Hart with everything still being so fresh. So that storyline had no logical finish that would have worked for anybody. That's why that match never made it to the Royal Rumble, and they went back to Undertaker. And then he gets hurt. And he gets hurt in the casket match. And unfortunately, when you have a guy that cries wolf so many times, the problem is when it's a legit situation, it's very hard to take him seriously. And that's exactly what happened here. I mean, you could, looking back at it, the casket match spot was brutal when he landed on the back. Then it comes out that he's not going to be able to work the No Way Out 8-man tag. Then he's not wrestling anything on Raw leading into Mania. And it was going to take a modern, act of God to get him to WrestleMania. And rightfully so, a lot of people did not buy it with Shawn. They didn't. They just thought it was another case of Shawn being Shawn. And here comes something where Shawn's going to have to drop the title to Austin. And he was just finding a way to squirm his way out of it. Shawn was in a shit ton of pain. Shawn was hurting. And it was just, it started to become clear as time went on, but it took a while to get there that, yeah, Shawn's in bad shape. Now, we get to Boston and the WrestleMania press conference, or in-ring exhibit, whatever it was called, with DX, Mike Tyson, and Austin were advertising a few here. Shawn gets pelted with a battery and leaves. It's to the point where Shawn's like, screw this, I'm leaving, fuck these people, whatever. They get Shawn to come back out. But again, this is a case where if you look at it, Shawn is right for storming out of there, but because Shawn had caused so much other shit in the past, it was hard to take Shawn seriously, and that's what happened. We get to WrestleMania, Shawn does the right thing, he walks out after the press conference, and it's not until at some point in the summer of 98, he shows up, but he's a different person. You could tell he's changed. He got married. He started to find his religion. He had a kid. And thank God that Shawn Michaels was left in the ring at WrestleMania 14. And I think everybody will agree that that was the best thing for that. Thank you for listening to this episode. We're going to be bouncing right back with a pretty quick mini episode looking at Bash at the Beach 2000. Again, I'm JCD. Thank you for listening.